I'm overwhelmed. I hardly know where to start. This is a tribute, not only unjustified, but far beyond my wildest dreams. I am greatly honored and deeply humbled by this gesture. It's hard to know where to start. General Martin, Kathleen Pearl, Al Zimmerman, my hosts for this day. Ash Carter, thank you for taking off time from problems I wouldn't wish on anyone to be with us tonight. Ash and I go back decades of cooperation. Ginni Rometty, those comments from the leader of the world example of outstanding business practicing is most touching to me. Peggy Johnson, associate and prodigious diplomer at Qualcomm, my thanks. And of course, Henry Kissinger, my North Star, without whom I wouldn't be here or anywhere else of note. And thanks for all of you out there for your support of NDU. It's late, and I won't say much, but I do have to say a few things. As I said this afternoon, my time at NDU was one of the highlights of my career. This is striking because, as you've already heard, I didn't want to go to the National War College. I told my boss when I was appointed, I said, I have a PhD, I've taught at West Point, I've taught at the Air Force Academy. The last thing I need on my resume is another academic accomplishment. He told me I had to go. And it was one of the highlights of my career. And I'll tell you why. Because I learned about the value of perspective, because here I was in a class with comrades from the Army, from the Navy, from the CIA, from the State Department. Unfortunately, at that time, we did not have foreign students. But what I saw was the importance, the significance and importance of perspective from where you come has a great influence on how you think. And that and the kinds of contacts I made from people throughout the country, throughout the throughout the government, was invaluable to me for the next couple of decades. Anything I can do to support the mission of the National Defense University, I want to do, because of what it gave me and the assistance it gave me in my later on career. And this was at a time of the depths of the Cold War, 1968, when things were in a way more critical than they've ever been, and that is the threat of a thermonuclear war, given a mistake, was just over the horizon. But in another sense, it was a contained universe, because the threat was a given. Our strategy was given to us. It was containment. It was to put our arms around the Soviet Union and hold them until the threat had disappeared. We had big arguments about tactics within administrations, with our European allies, but always under this umbrella of what are we trying to accomplish. And that made things, in a sense, a lot easier. The world now is much tougher. There is no overarching strategy. Indeed, for the world today, there probably couldn't be one. So now it's all tactics, and that makes it much more difficult to formulate positions to take to preserve our sense of purpose and our strategy for dealing with this world. And that's where the NDU plays a vital role. And that's why I feel so deeply about it. Because the world is a very different place than it was at the time I was a student here. As I say, there is no overarching strategy. In addition to that, the international system itself is changing in two important ways. And the first one was outlined by Henry Kissinger in his outstanding book on China, and that is one of the great powers of the world today doesn't have the sense that we do about what the world is. We are a Westphalian nation-state system of completely autonomous countries with their own laws, struggling with each other in what unfortunately was too often a zero-sum game. But that is the image, and that the 20th century was the ultimate in that kind of a structure. The Chinese structure is very different. It is the central kingdom idea. There is China, and there's everybody else. And while that's not a day-to-day issue, it sort of is in the background of both sides. So when Bob Zoellick, as president of the American Bank, or the World Bank, says China needs to become a responsible stakeholder, absolutely right. Doesn't that make sense? But for the Chinese stakeholder in a system we didn't have any role in producing, we have no responsibility for this system. Now, is that a day-to-day issue? No, but it is underlying a lot of the problems that we see with China because we look at problems very differently. The second is the issue of globalization, which is undermining this Westphalian nation-state system because fewer and fewer of the things a country feels are essential for its people can be done unilaterally, like health care, like climate change. All of those things need to reach out and have cooperation. So this is a very, and most primarily in terms of globalization, is information technology. Because what it is doing is politicizing people of the world who never before in history were involved in issues of statecraft or international politics. Now, they always thought, for example, that they lived just like their parents did, their children would live just like they did. There is a relentless, eternal time. Now they look at social media, they look at TV and so on, and they say, hey, that's not true. Other people don't live that way. And so we have politicized the world's, masses of the world's people who never before were, and we're reaping the consequences of that in terms of upheavals, in terms of unrest, in terms of Al-Qaeda, which is simply the symbol for the kind of unrest that our world is undergoing. And that's where NDU comes in. Because here, the mission is so important. And how we develop a strategy to deal with a world so different and so complex with the one we all grew up in is the mission of the NDU. And it is critically important. It was a foundation for what I developed as a process of thinking through and how you arrive at decisions that require action and consequences. And therefore, I think that anything we can do to help train our young people to be able to grapple with the problems of a world that we only dimly are beginning to understand now is important. So I thank all of you tonight, everyone who has been excessively kind to me, and all of you who have so concretely and overwhelmingly supported the mission of the National Defense University. Thank you very much. I am humbly but deeply grateful. Thank you.